Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sacker. The people of Hong Kong are getting used to a new reality, a draconian national security law made in China and imposed on the territory with no meaningful consultation. Pro-democracy activists call it the death of the one country, two systems principle. Well, my guest today is the former pro-democracy politician turned Beijing loyalist, Ronnie Tong. Is China suffocating the life out of Hong Kong's special status? Ronnie Tong in Hong Kong, welcome to Hard Talk.
Hello.
Let me begin with the concept of consultation. Are you comfortable with the fact that China has just imposed a law on the territory of Hong Kong with no meaningful consultation with the government or people of Hong Kong?
I don't think that is quite right. I think there are two things one need to remember. First of all, it is a law it is a law enacted by the mainland according to their legislative law. It is not a law enacted by the Legislative Council. So they would consult the way in which their law provides as to how to consult in relation to the lawmaking process. I wouldn't say that there was no meaningful consultation. I think quite the contrary. A lot of people put in opinion and advice, and I did so also. And the government was consulted, the Basic Law Committee was consulted. As far as I can tell, in the many opinions that are provided to the MPCSC, some of them were taken up, others resulted in introducing some kind of compromise in relation to some of the provisions.
Mr. Tong, it's hard to take that seriously, this notion there was meaningful consultation, when even your chief executive, Carrie Lam, said she did not know what was in the National Security Act until literally hours before it was implemented.
You misunderstood her. What she meant was that she did not read the actual text of the statute. But of course, the parameters of the law, are known to everybody. We know that it is to be a law which may touch upon human rights in Hong Kong, and therefore, our advice are basically center on trying to introduce a proper balance between protecting the safety of the nation on the one hand, and protecting the core values and freedoms of people of Hong Kong on the other.
Well, unless you no longer believe in the one country, two systems policy, I cannot believe then that your advice was taken in Beijing, because the entire National Security Act is, in spirit, if not in the letter of the law, a blatant violation of that principle.
Why do you say that? I don't quite understand your argument. Why do you say that? I mean, if you have read the statute itself, Article 4 deals with the preservation of freedoms and rights under the Basic Law and under the two conventions for human rights. Now I'm talking about the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Now those two conventions are not applicable to the rest of China. Although China is a signatory to those two conventions, China had never ratified those two conventions. But the fact that the two conventions are in the Basic Law, and it again specifically mentioned in Article 4 of the National Security Law, demonstrates quite clearly that the central government has proper respect for the different system in Hong Kong. Article 5 of the law also. Can I just finish? Sorry. Can I just finish? You can't bully me into accepting your question without allowing me to answer the question. Tong. Article 5 of the law also sets out all the elements of the rule of law that needed to be respected, like presumption of innocence, right to silence, right to defense, and so on and so forth. So why on earth would anybody say that the law is an affront to the rule of law? I can't understand it.
For one thing, Beijing now puts a very significant office full of its own national security and intelligence personnel in Hong Kong to carry out law enforcement activities in the city, and its staff are entirely not subject to Hong Kong law while carrying out their duties. How does that fit with one country, two systems?
Now, you're talking about the National Security Office. Now, the law makes it quite clear the enforcement and the application of the national security law is entirely to be carried out by the Hong Kong SAR, right? The office during that time would only provide advice to the SAR government. It doesn't have any law enforcement powers in that regard. Now, the only time when we would have... Just let me finish.
You don't even know. It hasn't even started its work yet.
The only time that it would take on cases would be, under one of the sections, I think it's Article 55, where, very special circumstances
exactly,
were identified.
Mr. Tong. Thank you for turning to Article 55. I appreciate it, because Article 55 makes it plain that in serious and complex national security cases, as defined by Beijing, that the defendants can be transferred to the Chinese mainland for prosecution.
Now, if you look at Article 55, it makes it quite clear that the office would only come into play if, due to some external circumstances, would make it impossible or difficult for the SAR government to enforce the law. And it's only in those circumstances that the office would come into play. But even then, when it takes on the case, it would take on the case in enforcing the national security law, that the one we're looking at, not the mainland national security law, so that all the provisions of the national security law as we're looking at it are still applicable and would be applied by the office.
Mr. Tong, I've looked at Article 55 myself. It's quite plain that in so-called serious and complex cases, they can be taken to the mainland for trial. Now, we have seen over many months Hong Kongers express their deep discontent and fury with the notion of an extradition law. We now have a national security law which makes it plain that in cases defined as serious by Beijing, they can be taken to the mainland for trial, and those defendants can face anything from 10 years to life imprisonment. Some people believe that the death penalty could be inflicted upon defendants who are found guilty in mainland courts. Again, it's a simple question, Mr. Tong, which you appear unable to answer.
No.
How does that fit?
No,
How does that fit with one country, two systems?
I resent that. I'm sorry, you just haven't been listening to what I'm saying. I am saying that under this law, the only time when the office can come into play and bring cases against people in Hong Kong would be within a very narrow compass as defined in the law. And even then, when it takes on the case...
And who defines this narrow compass, Mr. Tong? Who defines it?
No,
I'm sorry,
finished.
You're not answering any of my questions.
No, you're not allowing me to finish
narrow
the question. You're not allowing me to answer.
I'm asking you simple questions which require simple, straightforward, honest answers, not obfuscation.
No, I'm not obfuscating it at all. You are putting, questions on a false premise, and I'm trying to explain to you.
No, I'm certainly not, Mr. Tong.
Why your question was based on a false
simple
premise.
questions. Frankly, I expect simple, clear, straightforward answers.
I expect simple, clear questions which are based on facts. And I'm not expecting questions based on misinformation. All right?
I'm not giving you any misinformation, Mr. Tong.
Indeed, you are. You're just not accepting it. I've been trying to say to you that when the office takes on a case, it would take on the Hong Kong national security law, not the mainland national security law. The only difference is that it would come into play if and when the SAR government is not in a position to enforce the law, or that is not in the position to govern Hong Kong. This
Exactly.
is akin
And those
to
decisions
Article
will be
18
taken
of
in
the
Beijing.
Basic
That
Law,
is quite clear.
which states it very clearly that when there is a situation that Hong Kong government is unable to govern due to serious disturbances, or perhaps in a state of war, then the national government would come in. Now, that's the same situation as you will find in any other country,
if I may say so,
in any other federal
to be
government.
unwilling to engage
and I see
with
nothing
me
wrong
on the
with that.
detail.
And I
Perhaps you will
certainly don't
engage.
think that it is a disrespect of the one country, two systems. Quite the
Perhaps you
contrary,
will engage.
it allows for
If
the
you-
two
if you-
systems to
If
operate
you won't engage
in the
with
way
me, Mr.
and
Tong,
as
maybe
far as
you'll
you
engage
can.
with some of the most respected legal scholars in Hong Kong. Professor Johannes Chan at the University of Hong Kong, quote, "It is clear this law will have a severe impact on the freedom of expression in Hong Kong, also on the personal security of the people of Hong Kong. Effectively, China is imposing the People's Republic of China's criminal system onto the Hong Kong common law system, leaving Beijing with discretion to decide who should fall into which system."
Is that a question?
That is his analysis
Is that a question?
of this law.
I'm asking
and as
you,
I
is
say,
that a question?
As I say,
You're simply
he
repeating
is clearly
what somebody
suggesting
said.
this is a violation.
You're not putting a question properly. Now, the law says that it would be enforced in the common law, under the common law system, as I have explained it to you, with reference to protections under the Basic Law and the two conventions on human rights, and with reference to the rule of law and all the protections to a defendant will be there. And, would be applied by Hong Kong courts, by the way.
Why is it,
I mean,
Mr.
your
Tong,
suggestion
Mr. Tong,
seems
why
to be
do you think it is
that
that
Hong Kong
Professor
courts are
Chan at the
bogus
University of
courts?
Hong Kong,
They are not.
the Hong Kong Bar Association, which has condemned the national security law as utterly inconsistent with the Basic Law, the former Bar Association chair, Alan Leong, who says that Hong Kong as we know it, as a result of this law, is gone. Why are all these respected legal institutions and voices in complete disagreement with you, who, it has to be said, for the last few years has been a very obedient voice and opinion former on behalf of Beijing? Why do you think they all completely disagree with you?
I entirely resent that. I was a bar chairman before Alan Leong, all right? And I've been a Queen's Counsel and a senior counsel, for 25 years, all right? Now,
And
yes,
you are
they
now
are politically motivated.
completely
I
in
have not
disagreement
finished.
with the legal
I have not
opinions
finished.
of the
For
Bar
God's sake.
Association and
This is
all of the
ridiculous.
senior respected independent lawyers in Hong Kong.
This is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way to carry on an interview like this. You should be ashamed of yourself. I'm
not
saying
ashamed of myself, Mr. Tong. I'm really looking for answers.
you can't get an answer with questions like that because you're not putting it properly, and you don't seem to be in a position to give an opportunity for the interviewee to say something. There's no point to carry out this conversation if you do it like that.
Let me ask you another question and see if you can answer this one. We've seen people arrested already under the new national security law, at least 10 of them, as I understand it, in recent protests and demonstrations. It seems that those who've been charged under the new law were waving banners, asking for greater democracy, some of them asking for independence for Hong Kong. Do you believe those are the sorts of crimes that should be prosecuted under this national security law imposed by China?
You obviously haven't read the news. One stabbed a policeman, the other drove a bike towards a group of policemen, and all these people are arrested on suspicion of committing a crime. They have yet to be prosecuted under the national security law. And under the law, by the way, if you care to read it, any prosecution needs the written consent of the Secretary for Justice. All right? So the mere fact that you have a lot of violence in the street, and people get arrested, doesn't prove anything. It's the same, the world over. Policemen will arrest people
I would
for
beg to differ. It's
suspicion
not the same
of
the world
crimes.
over. I'm just wondering what happened to the Ronnie Tong who, when you left the pro-democracy Civic Party in 2015, said, yes, I'm leaving I'm leaving the party, but that does not mean I'm giving up the fight for democracy or that I am going to be subservient to the central government. What happened to that, Ronnie
Nothing
Tong?
happened. I'm
Where's
still
he
doing
gone?
that. It's just that, you don't believe it, doesn't mean that I'm not doing it. I'm still fighting for democracy for Hong Kong, but there's no way to fight democracy by trying to call for independence, is there? Is there any real chance for anybody in Hong Kong or elsewhere seriously think that by calling for independence to Hong Kong would succeed in getting full democracy?
You seem to be saying
in Hong Kong.
Forgive me if I'm misunderstanding you. You seem to be saying that anybody who expresses an opinion pro-independence is committing a crime.
You never allow me to give you an answer. This is ridiculous. The law doesn't say any of those things at all, and I certainly am not saying it. The law says, you would only commit an offense if your organizers plans, participates, and carry out, a purpose in the form of, harming the national interest or national safety of the country.
You know as well as I do that the people in Hong Kong who call for independence right now are living in fear because they fear, and indeed they know, based on what they've seen over the last few days, that they face serious risk of arrest under this new law.
No, it's not that at all. If you come to Hong Kong right now, you see that life goes on as always. Nobody's in fear. Nobody's fleeing the country. Quite the contrary. Over the last few months, tens of thousands of people have flocked back to Hong Kong because they have every confidence in the SAR government. So you're missing the point entirely.
As you know, Nathan Law, who is one of the leaders of Demosisto, the movement for democracy and fundamental reform in Hong Kong, has fled the country because, in his words, he says, what we are seeing is the start of a bloody cultural revolution, and he cannot continue his political activities in your territory.
I think it's just political ploy. He's free to go, he's free to come back. There's no warrant against him as such, and there's nobody persecuting him or prosecuting him. But, he would like to make use of, what he's doing as a political ploy. So, he's free to do that. Nobody's blaming him. He's free to come back if he wants to.
It is about Hong Kong's international reputation. Whether you like it or not, the US government is talking about new sanctions on Hong Kong. It has withdrawn Hong Kong's special trade status. The United Kingdom is talking about allowing, in the first instance, hundreds of thousands, but possibly up to 3 million Hong Kongers with the overseas passport, which allows them entry into Britain, allowing them to come to Britain and reside here for at least 5 years and maybe seek permanent residency in the UK. Governments around the world have looked at what China has done. They regard it as utterly unacceptable.
Well, first of all, no responsible government will succumb to political blackmail based on lies and misinformation. In any event, as I have been trying at pains to tell you, the law is to be enforced by the SAR government, not by mainland China. And it is to be adjudicated upon by our own judges. You seem to be insinuating that our courts are bogus courts and our judges are corrupt judges. They are not. They are not. They are internationally known to be well respected with adequate learnings of the law, known to have rule on cases justly and properly and respected by the rest of the common law world.
Your problem, Mr.
Why do you say the judges will not apply the law properly? Why do you have that inclination at all?
You can obfuscate and challenge with me, but your problem is, and the problem of Hong Kong and indeed of Beijing is, that countries around the world are drawing their own conclusions. They're not listening or not buying your justifications, and they are taking action. My question again is, how worried are you that the United States, for example, has withdrawn Hong Kong's special trade status, is talking about imposing new sanctions, and as early as this week, Congress could sign or at least seek President Trump's signature on a Hong Kong autonomy bill that would enforce sanctions on banks that do business with certain Chinese government entities. The pressure is building. How worried are you?
I'm not worried at all, and I'm quite sure the SAR government is not worried at all. The central government is not worried at all. This is just political ploy. U.S. is practically at war with China. We understand that. And as far as we are concerned, yes, the U.S. is one of the largest trading partners of Hong Kong, but it only occupies something like 9% of the trade relationship with Hong Kong. U.S., by the way, makes a huge, trading surplus with Hong Kong. Any sanction to be applied in Hong Kong would only hurt U.S. businessmen. It's rather like, cutting the nose to spite the face. But, as I said, no responsible government would succumb to political blackmail, particularly when it's based on lies and misinformation.
Yeah, well, you keep referring to lies and misinformation. I keep telling you that the countries around the world look at Hong Kong and they see,
in the past
if I may say so, Mr. Tong, they see
fact.
Hong Kong becoming more and more just another Chinese city. It does not have this special status anymore. It is not a question of one country, two systems anymore. And let me quote to you a politician in Japan who is looking, it has to be said, in terms of self-interest, at Japan's chance of taking opportunity from Hong Kong's troubles. Satsuki Katayama from the LDP, he says, what Japan is now offering to the world in terms of being a regional hub is what Hong Kong cannot offer, and that is freedom. Hong Kong is becoming the kind of place which doesn't allow people free expression. It even controls their Facebook likes. And are people going to put up with that? I think not. People want to trade and deal with a place where people can live normally. That is the new reality which Hong Kong will have to face. Your special status, your financial hub status, is under threat.
So be it. If people would like to carry on in ways like that with total disregards to facts, with what is happening on the ground, there's nothing much Hong Kong people can do, frankly. But, most of Hong Kong people feel that the international criticism is totally unjustified and entirely not supported by facts. I would invite you to come to Hong Kong anytime and see for yourself. This national security law is properly drawn up with proper provisions for the proper protection of human rights and core values of the people in Hong Kong. It is, by comparison, it is by far a better piece of legislation than, for instance, the Singaporean national security law.
Mr. Tong, it just sounds to me as we close, it sounds like you've thrown in your lot with Beijing and you're going to defend Beijing come what may.
No, I'm just pointing out the facts. If you can point to facts which would show to me that Hong Kong judges will not be able to apply this law properly with all the safeguards to human rights and core values, then I can deal with that sort of rational argument. But you're not putting forward any rational questions. You're simply reciting to me, page after page of political rhetoric from people who are known to be against the interests of both Hong Kong and China. And that doesn't cut any ice with me. I'm sorry.
No. Well, we'll have to leave the ice right there. Ronnie Tong, I thank you very much indeed for being on Hard Talk.